Welcome to the QMindBody Podcast. My name is Darren Main, and in this podcast, we talk about all things having to do with gay men becoming better versions of themselves, being healthier, happier, more well-adjusted, doing a little self-inquiry, some spiritual work. In this episode, we're going to talk about something that is, I think, very dear to my heart, and I'll talk about why once we get started. But that is the importance of our ancestors. And that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but really connecting with those that have gone before us, whether they're living or further back in our past, and how that can be really healing for us as gay men in particular, and how we can learn a lot by considering that. So to talk about this, I'm bringing in Peter Godard. He is a life coach and a management coach. And leadership coach, sorry. And his website is Great Bear Coaching. I want to find out why, greatbearcoaching.com. And I will put links to all of his information in the show notes so that you can get in touch with him if you like. I will also put links to my website and all the work I'm doing, coaching, massage, yoga, and a bunch of other stuff in the show notes. I'm also rolling out, finally, I've been announcing this loosely, but I'm announcing it officially now, a gay men's yoga group that's going to meet regularly. We're going to have a live one in San Francisco coming up, and I will put a link to that in the show notes, and an online one for those of you who are not in San Francisco. And it's going to be for everyone, whether you're new to yoga or been doing yoga a while. It's a chance to connect with other gay men, get in our bodies, and enjoy ourselves. Finally, this podcast is supported by the Gay Wellness website, and I will put a link to Gay Wellness. You can find massage therapists, coaches, and all kinds of other healers listed in your area and around the world. All that said, Peter, welcome to the QMindBody Podcast.
Thank you, Darren. It's good to be with you.
I'm super excited to chat with you, to get to know you a little bit more. I love your work, but I'm wondering, the question that's on everyone's mind, Great Bear Coaching, where did you get that name?
Well, I'll give you the simple answer and the deeper answer. The simple answer is I'm a bear. I'm a gay man who's part of the bear community. And a lot of the clients that I work with are bears. And I chose great for greatness, and really helping people shift from kind of surviving in life to thriving in life. So that was part of the story. And the deeper answer is actually that my husband and I were on a visit to Vermont, where I grew up. And we were looking up the night sky, which is not something you can do where I live in Chicago, and looking at the Big Dipper, which also that constellation is known as the Great Bear. And it just connected me to what it was like as a kid to live in a place where we could look at the stars. I have a deep sense of spirituality, and oftentimes in my coaching, I feel like I have that same wonder in looking at other people and listening to their stories as I do looking at something beautiful in nature. And so that was also part of the origin story for that name.
I love, people put so much into marketing and branding and coming up with a name for their business or a brand for their business. And I love it when somebody actually has a deeply personal answer to that question. Because I feel like as healers, whether you're coaching or massage or yoga or whatever it is you're doing, it's really about sharing yourself and sharing your journey and hopefully being a guidepost for others. And thank you. That's such a great answer. Well, let's just, I want to talk about ancestors, and you picked this topic. I love it. But before we get into that, I'm wondering if you could just say how you got on this journey of working with gay men, specifically in the bear community, and what it is you do. What exactly is a leadership life coach do, and why were you drawn to that? How did you get there?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll start with how did I become a leadership coach, and then I can move to why did I specifically decide I wanted to work with gay men and specifically with bears. I grew up, I'm already mentioned, I grew up in Vermont. I grew up on an island in Lake Champlain, and I grew up deeply connected to community in a place. My dad was actually the owner of the general store where I grew up. And so I
Mm.
grew up with people coming and going from the downstairs of our house, which was the store in the town, all day long. And as a kid, I thought that was normal, that you just knew everybody in your town. And so I grew up with this deep sense of belonging. And then I moved from that little town to Chicago for college, and ended up working in a variety of jobs, but ultimately some leadership jobs where I felt like not only masking as that sort of very sensitive, deeply community oriented kid that I was, but also as a queer person, very masked in order to survive in these large organizational settings. And I really got sick of it. And so I started to think about, like, okay, what do I want to be doing rather than what am I good at doing? And I found something that really just spoke to my soul, which is supporting people to go through transitions and transformations in their lives. And part of why that spoke to me was that I was going through my own transition and transformation in my own life, in terms of embodying who I am as a gay man confidently, and being able to make choices in my personal life, my romantic life, my community life that were meaningful to me. So I wanted to share what I had learned with others. And then, having gone through some coach training at Georgetown, I was ready to do coaching. And I sort of 7 or 8 years ago started coaching with the idea of running a business where I could do coaching for the purposes of coaching with people who needed coaching, to your point about starting
Mm.
a business. And then I really started to explore, who could I really help? Who would it be meaningful for me to help? And I realized that a part of this, my own story that really mattered to me was, how did I, as a queer person, come to feel confident in who I am, feel grounded in a community of other queer people that was very different from that little boy living above a store and knowing everybody in town, but also very similar in terms of
Mm.
feeling like I belonged and I was part of something. And so, yeah, I've just been following that path of curiosity and joy toward
Yeah.
supporting other queer people in their lives, and specifically gay men.
I have a quick follow-up question. You said you work with the bear community specifically. I'm wondering what specifically or generally um, do you feel is unique to the bear community? I mean, like, is there work that you feel is important to do in that space that is not being met somewhere else, or you can take
Yeah.
that where you like?
Well, I guess what occurs to me is, by nature of being a bear, many of us who are currently bears grew up as little fat gay boys. And so we have two identities through which we have some sense of what an outsider experience is like. And I sort of come to this work, and my day job is working as a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. I do this work with gay men on a part-time basis. And together that sort of forms the wholeness of what I like to do with my professional life. And in that work, what I have seen is a magic of looking at ourselves in complex ways based on many, many different identities. So not only am I a bear, am I a gay person and a man and a person with a large body, I'm also a white person. I'm also part of Generation X. I'm also an English and Spanish speaker and a multiracial relationship. So working with gay men who are bears in particular, part of what I think is interesting and different about that is, just by the nature of being a bear, you're already bringing multiple identities to the table. And in the conversations I have with my clients, oftentimes we're navigating between their multiple identities in our coaching conversations.
Hmm. You know, it's interesting. I haven't really given this thought until you were just saying this, but I one of the things I love about gay men in general is, and we're not always great at it, to be fair, but we have this capacity, sort of this alchemy capacity to transform one thing into another, like shame into celebration.
Mm.
And it's interesting when I was hearing you say that, um, the idea that not everybody is attracted to bears, and nor should they be. We're to skinny people or muscular people. I mean, we're all into what we're into, but the idea that this can be a sexy, desirable thing, that,
Mm.
that we can drop the shame around body shape, and you don't have to look like Tom of Finland.
Yeah.
To be sexy. Sexy comes in all shapes and sizes, and body hair or no body hair or whatever. And the fact that we can hold that and say, here's a whole genre of queer sex and sexiness that is on the menu for you.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
pretty amazing in a world that it seems dead set on fat shaming everybody.
Yeah. Well, it seems dead set on fat shaming everybody. And also, I think the body positivity movement and the body neutrality movement have made tremendous strides in the last 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
So it's amazing these days to sort of see that, like, if you want to see a gay man dance in their underpants on the internet, you can find one of any shape, size, color. You know, there is some shaming that happens, and also there's a lot of joyful self-discovery and self-expression happening.
Yeah. Well, let's shift gears and move into talking about ancestors. And I have lots of thoughts on this, and I know you do, but since you picked the topic, I'm wondering what that means. Like, what does the word ancestor mean to you? It could mean, the cave people that once inhabited the earth that are our distant ancestors. It could be your great grandmother, or it could be people that we may have even met. But what does that mean to you, and why is it important that we as gay men think about that?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. It's a great place to start. And so for me personally, when I think of my queer ancestors, there are several biological relatives who either were queer or who lived in a queer way, meaning they didn't fit the boxes of the culture and society they lived in. And I think about their stories, and I've got their pictures around my desk. So for me, it can be literally an ancestor. And I think it's important for us to think about ancestors. I think about these particular ancestors I'm describing because they help me connect to a sense of belonging and a sense of, I didn't invent queerness, right? Like, I am a queer person who is one of many, many generations that have come where there are gay and queer people. And it makes me feel more like I belong to the world in the same way that, in particular, in my queer identity. So that's why it feels important to me. In terms of who ancestors are, I think it really depends on the person, right? Like, some people may be connected to stories about their own personal biological ancestors. Other people may have had a mentor or a relationship or even a historical figure or a person in popular culture who's meaningful to them, who shows them what it's like to be queer, or who was important to them at a moment in their coming out process.
Yeah.
I'm curious how that resonates for you, or if there's, like, what is it? How would you answer the same question?
Well, exactly what you said. I think that for me as a gay man, I think that most of our ancestors, like, I'm Gen X as well, and so coming of age as the AIDS crisis was just exploding, like right as I was going through puberty, Rock Hudson was in the news, that shockingly dying of AIDS, and it's sort of having, because so many of our ancestors were deeply in the closet, and then right on the heels of that, they just started to come out, and then all of a sudden they were all dying. And so, like, a whole generation of men that, in theory at least, would have been there to help us to figure out who we are and navigate what it means to be to be mentors to us, or going further back, it's hard to read about like a lot of historical figures that, we sort of suspect were queer, but we don't know a lot about them because it was sort of private. It was kept quiet. And so for me, it's like recognizing that there is a gap there, and that filling in that gap is some of the important work we need to do, especially given the HIV sort of bomb that got dropped in the middle of my coming out.
Yeah, yeah. I think you and I are maybe of kind of the same part of Generation X. And for me, I've been joking lately that I'm in my daddy era, because there's sort of an appreciation of gay men of our age, right? And like, I think maybe it was about 10 years ago, my husband and I were in London, and for the first time he got catcalled, and some guys said, "Hey, daddy." So, I mean, it's funny. And also, for gay and queer men who are coming of age today, there are mentors in the community, right? And I have several friends who are younger, in their 20s and 30s, for whom I offer, we have like a mutualistic friendship, and I also offer a little mentorship here and there, about my own experience, and I learn from them about their experience.
I was recently dating a guy, and it didn't work out, but he's an amazing man. And he was younger. I mean, not that much younger. I'm 54 and he was in his mid 30s. And I remember having this conversation with him about what it was like. I'm HIV positive long term, like 25 years or more. And then of course, just even before that, living with HIV all around me and watching everybody die, and having this conversation with him, and not in a bad way, but what was my lived experience is something he learned about in a book, or by reading about, or hearing from people. And it's an important part of our history. And I'm so grateful that younger gay men don't have to live it. They can read about it and they can hear about it, and they don't have to carry that burden. But it was interesting to share some of that with him, and to see him go, wow, that's and I wish I had that myself, like,
Yeah.
but it just didn't exist. I mean, like you said, a lot of the men older than us, the generation older than us, were not available for horrible reasons.
Yeah.
Well, this is all very depressing. No, I mean, it's depressing. I think acknowledging that hole is there could be depressing, but I think what you bring to the table that I think is really important is that there are things we can do to help fill that hole, to heal that sort of psychic collective wound that we have.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what you think that might be, for somebody who wants to connect a little bit more to our ancestors, even though it's not always entirely possible to do it in the more traditional way. Like, I'm wondering what you advise, what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. I mean, my thinking about that is, this is really informed by an experience I had in my early 30s. So I'm a person, I had a parent die in my teenage years. My dad died when I was 16. And for probably more than a decade, I had this sort of sense of absence, right? That was kind of unexplored. And then I was working in therapy, and my therapist said, "Why don't you just take a picture of your dad and put him in the kitchen?" Right? Like, because I told these stories about how my dad was a great cook. And so it wasn't like a big thing. I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but I'd be like, making coffee in the morning, and there would be the picture of my dad, who didn't have a picture anywhere in my house prior to that. And it just allowed me to sort of be in this day-to-day relationship with the memory of my dad. And it was a really healing experience. So given that, I think how we can come into relationship with our ancestors is really just as simple as that. in my case, I really thought about who are the people in my bio family who have some queerness involved in their lives, right? Like maybe they were unmarried. Maybe they were part of a religious order. Maybe they just didn't fit the box of sort of cis heteronormativity. And so to really kind of come into relationship with them, and maybe even just having to imagine their stories because I didn't fully know about it, and bringing their pictures into my workspace. Or for other people, like I've met people who have said, "Oh, that's great, Peter," but like I don't have any memories of anybody who's like that. Connecting to anyone that you might want to claim as an ancestor, meaning somebody who connects you to a sense that you are not alone in the world, that you are not sort of the first generation of queer people, or that you're not sort of inventing this as we go along, right? And so for some people, that might be authors who have been influential. It might have been a professor who was kind to them when they were in school, or it could be, a mentor at an early job. Or even if it's not that, it could be, who's somebody in popular culture who you find really inspiring. Like Billy Porter has this great song called Children, and it's essentially on this theme, right? About we need to teach the future generations about like how to embody belonging as queer people.
As you were talking, you brought up this memory when I was pretty little. My mother had a cousin who died suddenly. He was probably in his 30s, mid to late 30s at the time, and he was sort of. I didn't know anything about him, but he was sort of as being a bit odd, and he was a flight attendant. All the signs were there. He died of pneumonia, and it was really odd. And at the time, no one knew what HIV or AIDS was.
Yeah.
And then his father passed away a number of years after that, and we were cleaning out the house, and I found in his room, my mother's cousin's room, some gay pornography. And it sort of like the pieces clicked together, like, oh my God, he was gay and lived in the closet and most likely died of AIDS before anybody knew what it was. And I've often thought of that, like how important it would be. And I've actually thought about Googling it a few times, like, are they even taking submissions for the AIDS Quilt nowadays? But how that memory, like, even though, what would it have been like had he lived and I had a relative that came out and sort of paved the way for me and made it just a little bit easier for me to come out to my family, And so thank you for bringing that memory up and just remembering the person from my past.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. It's I'm kind of touched because I have a similar story. Like one of my queer ancestors, I never really knew him. He died when I was 8. And like many of the details are the same. He moved away from his small town to live in California. And then around 1984, he died of cancer. And that's what I knew about him. But many years later, I had this like pieces clicking together experience, like what you're describing. And I've been on a journey of just, I'll say his name or I'll acknowledge him. And it's not like we had a real relationship, but thinking about him or like building an adult awareness of him has been meaningful to me to sort of say, like there were people like me in the previous generations of my family. I'm not alone. I belong.
Yeah. How, beyond just like acknowledging that this is an important thing, like if I were to come to you for coaching and I mentioned, this relative that I hardly knew, I barely remember ever meeting him, and it be saying, well, that's sort of significant. Maybe you could investigate that more. What types of things could I do to, like, beyond just like, oh yeah, it's weird that happened, or like how could I take that deeper and do something with that because it feels important.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, we could go about this in a couple ways, so just say no. But I wonder about actually seeing what we might do with that as an example, because there are many things we could do, but I'm curious, what makes that story feel meaningful to you right now as we're talking?
Good question. I think the fact that the things that I find very emotional, like just general things, or like the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier,
Mm,
where that feeling of just not knowing what happened. And I think of him. I mean, I know nothing about him, so I can only guess what life must have been like for him.
mm,
But that he struggled so much to hide who he was. He wasn't out. I don't think it was a big surprise to the adults in my life
mhm.
that it later came out that he was gay. But he didn't come out on his own. And thinking about the struggle of him trying to find his place in the world and the work that that generation did of like the pre-Stonewall generation of like living in secret but also finding themselves at that time,
Yeah.
um it feels important to me, like, and he represents that for me, like that he lived in a secret, he held that secret, and HIV killed him, but that secret helped sort of create a petri dish where HIV could spread unchecked without the government or anyone even caring.
Yeah.
Um, so that is why it feels significant to me, and the fact that he was part of my family, even though I hardly knew him.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're holding an appreciation for not just him, but for a whole generation, and kind of what they
Yeah,
endured, what they were resilient toward, how they were activists in making some of your life possible.
yeah. I think that we frequently look down on people who are in the closet. Oh, he's a closet case.
Yeah.
um, the comments like that, which I think are horrific, and we should ban that phrase. But I think of how brave it was for people to move across the country and start living their truth, even if it
Yeah.
was in ghettoized neighborhoods and speakeasy style bars early on. Um, to really have that safe space that they created where they could find themselves so that things like Stonewall could happen and Harvey Milk could get elected and all of that. It
Yeah.
just feels really like we should honor that
Yeah.
because they were literally risking their lives to do it.
Yeah. As you're talking, I'm thinking about what you asked, which is, what else might we do in coaching beyond, acknowledging? As I'm listening to you talk, I'm also kind of holding that same feeling of appreciation toward my queer ancestor, Leonard, who I mentioned, of the same generation, some of the same experiences you're describing. And for me, I don't know if this is resonant for you too, and is um, it's also helping me take care of the parts of me that had to mask themselves, or where like I didn't have to go live in a ghetto on the other side of the country, but there are ways in which I was freer and more myself moving to a large city away from where I grew up, where
Yeah,
I could be more free. So there's a part of me that I'm healing too as I'm connecting to these ancestors beyond
yeah,
honoring them, which also feels important.
yeah. It's interesting as we're talking. Um, I feel like we're at a very precarious time right now politically,
Mm.
where the queer community, the trans community in particular, but I think it's the entire queer community, is feeling very threatened.
Yeah,
And part of me is like, our ancestors did this. They did it. They fought with HIV. They, to get treatment, to get um, dignity, and they did it coming out with things like Stonewall. And we got this. Like, it's going to suck. I don't want to minimize the journey ahead of us, but our ancestors showed us the way.
Yeah.
They showed us how to live in our truth.
Yeah.
So, we got this.
Our people did
Thank
hard
you, Harvey
things.
Milk.
Yeah. Our people did hard things, and we can do hard things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about your work and how people might want to connect with you, because I have a feeling that some people hearing this are like, wow, this is a whole avenue of exploration that I hadn't even considered. So I'm wondering if you could say just a little bit about your work and how do you work with people online, in person?
Mm-hmm.
How can they learn more about you, get in touch with you, all of that?
Yeah, for sure. So I work primarily online, and also I'm in Chicago and work in person with some folks in Chicago, and do my work through one-on-one sessions. I most often work with people who are in a moment of transition in their life, which is part of where these ancestors come in. It's a great source of self-empowerment in a moment of challenge or doubt or transition. And I like to say I help people reconnect with their magic so they can start creating more balance, more connection, more fulfillment, more steps forward. So that's the work that I do. I offer an intake session with folks where we can spend an hour getting to know each other. Maybe we can have a chat about ancestors, and always like to help people leave a session like that feeling like they have a step forward. And also, if they like to work together after that, fantastic. And you can also find me spreading joy and creating community and encouraging people to self-care on Instagram as well.
Yeah. I am feeling like we've only scratched the surface of this conversation.
For sure.
And I would love to do a part 2, or maybe a more targeted version of this conversation, because I mean, there's so many threads that we started to pull on. I could see pulling on each one individually and seeing what comes out. It feels like this feels really important to me. I remember years ago, I took my poor stepdad. He came to visit with my mom, and he's like completely conservative. It's like the birdcage or something. And I set up a walking tour of the Castro, and the woman who did it at the time, it's really amazing, lesbian, sort of shared these stories, and it was interesting to see how engaged even he was in hearing these stories. And I remember then like learning so much. Like, we just didn't, gay people didn't just hatch out of an egg. Like it we've always been here, and learning our stories is really important. So Peter Godard, your website is greatbearcoaching.com. Of course, I'm going to link to your website in the show notes so people can learn more about you, and they can also follow you on social media. I know Instagram, Facebook, maybe? Anywhere else?
LinkedIn, and also on TikTok.
TikTok, wow. Then we're going to have to kick you out of Gen X.
Well, the pandemic did weird things to all of us, and TikTok was one of the things it did to me.
I have tried TikTok, and I can't do it. I just can't. I feel old, and my son makes fun of me all the time. It's like, I'm sorry, I'm a Facebook guy. Bah! I'm going to chase you off my porch with a rake. My website is darrenmain.com, and I will post links to everything. If you'd like to get involved in the QMindBody community, we have a Facebook group where you can share and connect with other mindful gay men. And like I said, I'll be posting information about various gatherings and live events, both online and in the real world as well. So definitely click on that and get connected. And if you have questions for either of us, it's a great place to drop those questions is in the Facebook, or not the Facebook, the YouTube and the Spotify comment section, and we will keep an eye on those and do our best to respond. Peter, thank you so much. Thank you for helping me get in touch with my ancestors today, and I look forward to connecting with you more.